Now, 61% of Kenyan families in urban areas live in slums simply because good quality housing is unavailable and unaffordable. Despite having East Africa's biggest capital markets, Kenya has barely 25,000 mortgages in a country with a population of over 40 million people. Now, the expensive cost of mortgages with an average interest rate of over 17% partly explains the unmet demand for 2 million houses. The World Bank says that the figure rises by over 240,000 units each year. Despite this, Kenyan real estate has been a hot asset class for years. And as CGTN's Ramah Nyang finds out, savings and credit societies are filling in the funding gap left by commercial banks.
But what we found when we started looking closer was that there are actually real mortgages coming from the SACCO sector, registered mortgages that the supervisory authority is overseeing, the SASRA. And then on top of that, the SACCOs and the housing cooperatives are doing a whole range of different housing finance products that aren't proper mortgages. But they're still lending for incremental building. The housing cooperatives are buying large swatches of land and subdividing them for their clients and then helping them build incrementally. So these are the guys I think that we think are providing the rest of the financing and probably triple, quadruple the amount that the banks and the number of mortgages that you see out there in the market.
One of the main problems that comes up, at least in this study, is the fact that there's a distinct lack of long-term funding available to actually enable people to then take those long-term mortgages at much more affordable rates. What are the securitization options that perhaps SACCOs can explore to solve that problem?
So in Kenya right now, it's probably premature to think about securitization because for securitization you need a very high volume of a number of loans that look exactly alike and that have very standard underwriting criteria. That's kind of what you need to securitize in general. And we're not there yet. So we don't think of that necessarily the immediate next step. We think it's sort of an incremental process and securitization would come a little bit later. What we're thinking more is really accessing long-term finance and being able to use those existing mortgages or those existing loans in a way that you could actually use the capital markets. And that to us is more of a shorter term solution. And that will be issued by who exactly? The banks themselves or by the government to essentially backstop the mortgages that the private sector? That's a great question. So right now some of the banks are able to raise these resources on the capital market, as you know. What we're doing right now is we're having a discussion with the National Treasury where they're asking the World Bank to come and help them set up a mortgage refinance facility that would be privately owned and that would be able to issue bonds on the capital market. And SACCOs or banks or other lenders would be able to basically use their mortgages as collateral and access that long-term funding and then lend those funds out to their own borrower.
Nigeria has tried something similar because they do have a mortgage refinancing company over there. How's it worked out in other markets and what can we learn from execution, say in Nigeria, when it comes to setting up our own system here?
Well, I think whatever solution we propose is going to be very Kenyan. Let me just say that. So Nigeria had a little bit of a different approach where it was majority government owned. And they also have a couple of other different components. So they're also doing a housing finance guarantee and they're also doing microfinance as well as the refinance facility. They did issue their first bond for 40 million USD and it was fully subscribed. And they're still in very early stages. What we found in Nigeria actually is this is one of the things that has catalyzed the lenders around the standardization process, and improving their underwriting criteria. So that's one thing that we also know from Nigeria.
The thing about housing supply here so far has been that it's focused on the top end of the market, but the lower income side has consistently been ignored. Is that because perhaps a lot of these actors don't see it as a viable market despite the demand, or do they look at incomes and say, I'm not sure I can make a return here at this particular cost of funding?
Well, we do have some interesting players who are out in the market who are targeting affordability and affordable housing, and Karibu Homes is one of them. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Why is it mostly high end? Well, there are a lot of things happening at the low end that make it challenging to actually find a space where you can build affordable housing. So one is a lot of the buyers have informal incomes and those incomes are variable. And formal lenders feel uncomfortable sometimes lending to the informal sector. So that's an issue. As you know, land is very expensive. Serviced land is even more expensive. Kenya is not known for having really efficient construction costs. To a certain extent, they're using kind of old school materials, and there's a real opportunity, I think, to modernize the way that they actually build.
Now, it's worth pointing out that a range of reforms to encourage more affordable, low-cost housing have been tried out in Kenya before. In June, we saw the finance minister propose to cut the corporate income tax rate to 20% for developers who built at least 1,000 units per year. That was changed to a 15% income tax rate for developers who built at least 400 low-cost units a year. Now, it's still not clear, however, if these incentives have delivered the expected return.